It's officially a bye week for TCU football. They are 4-4. How will they bounce back in about 10 days when they take on Texas Tech on a Thursday night? Can they recover this season at all? Are there staff changes on the horizon? All that and more coming up next. It's Locked On Horned Frogs.
You are Locked On Horned Frogs, your daily podcast on the TCU Horned Frogs, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Locked On Horned Frogs, subscribe to the YouTube channel. You can also find us wherever it is you get podcasts in its audio form. Subscribe on those platforms as well, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, etc. Thank you to everyone who watched the post-game show the other night. I know it was not the most fun game to watch. TCU gets blown up by Kansas State 41-3, but I really like doing those. You know, I had an interaction on Twitter with somebody. I don't have it pulled up right now, so I apologize, whoever it was, for not giving your name or your handle out there. But they were just like, thanks for doing these. And I like doing them. I feel like it's win or lose. It's just really nice to get kind of thoughts out and sort of voice whatever is going on in my head and hopefully communicate some of the things you guys are thinking after these games, regardless of the outcome. But TCU is now 4-4, and they have a bye week. They had a little time off, and I think it comes at a good time in the season. Now, unfortunately for the Frogs, like the season hasn't gone how they wanted to. So, you know, you're not talking about like a 6-2 team that's getting a nice break before the stretch run. Saturday night was awful. You know, they got dominated from start to finish. And there have been a lot of people that have been reaching out to me or asking the question kind of openly, okay, what happens now with this coaching staff and specifically the coordinators, Joe Gillespie and Kendall Briles, moving forward? The season hasn't gone well. Offense has struggled lately. Defense has really struggled at times. And so how does Sonny Dykes and the power brokers sort of handle this as we get closer to the end of the season? And the first thing I would say, you know, we saw Dan Enos at Arkansas get fired yesterday or on Sunday, the offensive coordinator for the Hogs. And it's still pretty rare to see changes like that from a coordinator position in the middle of the season. So I think anything that's going to happen is going to happen after the year. That's not me saying anybody's right or wrong for asking these questions at this point in the year, but TCU, they still have a chance to get to 6 wins, which would put them in bowl eligibility. I know that's not the expectation that the Frogs had before the season. I'm not saying that should be the expectation. I think TCU should be better than that. I think the season should have gone better than it has so far. And I really felt like Sonny Dykes was the type of coach to get them to a place where they weren't kind of in this hamster wheel of mediocrity that I was talking about, you know, during the offseason, where typically, like we see a TCU team, the trend lately has been if you have an experienced group, a veteran group that's at the height of their development cycle, I mean, you have a lot of juniors and seniors that have played a lot of college football, then there's a chance that they're going to be good. They could push for, 10-plus wins. Be a contender in the Big 12, be a contender in the national landscape. And if you don't, if it's a young team, if it's an experienced team, if you have, a shakeup and a lot of roster turnover, then you're probably looking at a group that's fighting to get to 500. And I was hopeful that they could shake that, narrative this season, but it hasn't been the case. They replaced a lot of talent. It hasn't worked. The minor coaching staff changes they've made, the results haven't been great so far. And I saw Joel Anderson say this the other day on Twitter, and Joel's a writer for actually, I'm not sure where he's at now. I know he used to write for Slate, and he does really good work in the podcast world, but he used to cover college football for ESPN, and he's a Horned Frog alum, played at TCU, played football at TCU. And he said one really concerning thing about where TCU's at right now is they're 4-4. They're the national runner-up. They're having a really disappointing season, and nationally, nobody's really talking about it, right? Like, we're obviously talking about it, and that's why I'd love for you guys to stay here and listen to the local angle, because we talk TCU athletics 5-6 days a week. But the bottom line is, you're not hearing on college game day, you're not seeing a segment like what's wrong with TCU football. You listen to college football podcasts, you're not hearing them talk about the Frogs. And I think it speaks to the fact that when TCU is not great and not playing well, then they're just not as relevant in the national landscape. And that's the case for most college football teams. But I feel like it's a concerning thing for, the image and the brand of this team. You want to get to a place where, I know negative attention is not great, but at least people are kind of raising their eyebrow and they're like, well, what's going on with this football team? I think, unfortunately, it says that most people thought this was where they were going or where they were headed or what could happen with this season. But talking about the coordinators, I don't think anything's going to happen until after the season. And I know everybody is upset with Joe Gillespie right now. And listen, I'm not going to try to give any excuses for what happened Saturday. That was a bad performance by the TCU defense. Like there's no way around it. There's no way to sugarcoat it. They gave up 41 points. They could have given up a lot more points than that. Like Kansas State, they had control of that game from the jump, and they sort of took their foot off the gas. But I talked about it Saturday. And those first 3 drives, the Wildcats faced 1 third down, and it was a 3rd and 1. It didn't matter if Avery Johnson was taking snaps, if Will Howard was taking snaps. They got whatever they wanted in the run game. They threw the ball well. They did everything they wanted to on the offensive side of the ball. And it was the most inept. Like, even the Colorado game, it was back and forth. It was a shootout. But I at least felt like the defense occasionally was able to kind of bow up and get some stops. The only stop I can really think of off the top of my head when the game was still in the balance, or at least there was a chance that TCU could come back, was that 4th down stop when I think the Frogs were up 24 TCU was down 24-3. Kansas State was leading 24-3. They got a 4th down stop around midfield and gave the offense a chance to go maybe score a touchdown before halftime, and that didn't end up happening. But overall, I mean, they just got bullied. And the biggest sign of concern for me was that Kansas State just physically mauled them. I think this has been a team, for the most part, that has held up okay against the run game, but they had no answer for what Kansas State was doing running the football. Whether it was quarterback power, whether it was, guard tackle pulling around, counter stuff. Man, it was a rough deal. And the way that the Frogs played on that side of the ball was just absolutely unacceptable. There's no way around it. I will, however, say, yes, it was against offenses that are struggling, and I could turn out to be totally wrong by the end of the year. I thought they played pretty well, games 2 through 5 or 6 or whatever. There was a stretch of 4 or 5 weeks where I felt like the defense was improving. There were still some of these same issues that we've always had with Coach Gillespie, which is you have a 3-man front. It's hard to get the quarterback unless you just have really great defensive linemen who can beat double teams and are game wreckers. And right now, TCU doesn't have that. The delayed blitzes weren't really working. The discipline wasn't there. But they were able to get off the field at times, make plays, keep their offense in the game. They had no answer for what Kansas State was doing. And so I was just kind of doing some digging last night, like trying to find, okay, offense and defense, what numbers do we have? And so the defense, they gave up 45 points in week 1, and then 6 points against Nicholls State, 13 against Houston, 17 to SMU, 24 to West Virginia, 27 to Iowa State, 11 points against BYU, and then 41 against K-State. And so the numbers don't look terrible overall when you look at it like that. But there's obviously context here, right? Like the best offenses they played this year are Kansas State and Colorado. And those teams put up 40-plus against them. And really the defense didn't have much resistance in either of those ball games. If you're curious, the scoring defense, they're giving up 23 points a game, which is currently 52nd in the nation. Red zone defense, teams score 81% of the time, which is 63rd in the nation. They're 22 of 27 on getting points once they get in the red zone. They are 14 of 27 on scoring touchdowns. So the defense has done a decent job. About 50% of the time teams are scoring touchdowns when they get the red zone. So they've been able to hold teams to 3 at times. But against Kansas State, that wasn't the case. I mean, K-State did whatever they wanted. And when they got inside the 20, inside the 10, whatever the case was, they would score a touchdown. And third down conversion percentage, they're giving up third downs 34% of the time, which is 74th in the nation. And, 23 points a game, like if you look at that list, the scoring defense list, Michigan's only giving up 5 points a game. There's the list of the top 20 is like teams that are giving up between 5 and 20 points a game and are elite. And then after that, it's kind of a wash. Like 25 through 70, everybody's around 22 to 27. And it's for the most part defenses that I think you would say are fairly mediocre. And so the numbers don't bear out that this is just a horrible defense. But I think the issue is when this defense has played teams that are good to elite on offense. And so you go back to the Michigan game, a really good first half against the Wolverines, but then second half, things unravel on them. Georgia, we know what happened there. They just get destroyed. Colorado put up 45 points. Kansas State did whatever they wanted on Saturday. And in year two, with a lot of returners, I thought this defense could definitely be better than what they showed Saturday. But I thought they could consistently be a unit that kept their team in games. And the bottom line is they just haven't done that. When we come back, we'll talk about what the offense looks like, and we'll talk about big picture, kind of what this means for TCU moving forward. It's Locked On Horned Frogs. It's your team, and we do it here every day. Athletic Brewing Company. They have changed the game when it comes to non-alcoholic drinks and alcoholic beverages. They have completely, just found a way to change everything you thought about non-alcoholic drinks. They taste good. They're full flavor. They're well crafted, just like a full-strength beer. They have 50 styles of craft, IPAs, golden sours, and more. They're constantly releasing limited edition experimental styles to add to their variety. Our game changer of the week, because Athletic Brewing is a game changer in their industry. I couldn't pick a TCU player this week because they just didn't. There was nobody. They got beat 41-3. Okay, just bear with me. I'm sorry. I know this is Locked On Horned Frogs. I'm going to go with Avery Johnson from Kansas State because he looks the part. He was incredible as a QB. He, like Athletic Brewing Company, is a game changer in the industry, in this space. It's fit for all times. You can drink it watching a game. I had one last night watching Game 6 of Astros Rangers, Game 7 tonight. I'll probably have one as well. And you can find it online. You can find it at the bar and stores. It's everywhere now. Athleticbrewing.com, and use the promo code LOCKEDON and get 15% off your first online order. That's code LOCKEDON at checkout for 15% off at athleticbrewingcompany.com. Exclusions and conditions do apply. Athletic Brewing Company, fit for all time. You see it on the screen if you're there on YouTube. Athleticbrewing.com. Use that code LOCKEDON, get 15% off your first order. Okay, so what do the numbers look like offensively for TCU? And from a points perspective, they scored 42 points in that week one game against Colorado, 41 against Nicholls State, 36 against Houston, 34 against SMU, 21 against West Virginia, 14 against Iowa State, 44 against BYU, and then 3 points on Saturday. So, besides that BYU game, since the SMU game, you have just seen a complete fall off a cliff for this offense. Getting shut out in the second half against West Virginia. Only 14 points against Iowa State. Of course, Chandler Morris goes down in that ball game. They transition to Josh Hoover. They have a nice game against BYU where they score 44 points, and then they follow that up with a really rough performance against Kansas State. This offense is bad. The offensive line is not very good. They weren't able to protect they weren't able to protect Josh Hoover, in that game against Kansas State. They're really struggling to run the ball right now as the schedule's gone on and gotten tougher. They just can't really move these, good defensive linemen and front sevens that they have faced. And then also, like in this game against Kansas State, one thing that really played out was just the fact that, you get down 14-0 early. You got a young quarterback on the road. It's a tough task. But the fact that they couldn't even score in garbage time. Like late in the ballgame in the fourth quarter, when the game was at hand, they couldn't put a drive together. Got near the goal line late in the fourth quarter. We're calling timeouts to try to just get like a sad touchdown at the end of the ballgame and couldn't even do that. They looked totally discombobulated. And when we're talking about Kendall Briles, I mean, like we'll take, and I'm not dismissing this at all, but I'm trying to just assess the on the field product. Like, yes, Sonny Dykes made a controversial hire. He hired someone that a lot of people were out on from the beginning, and they haven't done a good job. Like, the offense has been bad. And this has been the most dumbfounding thing to me. Like, I thought the defense would be good, but historically, Sonny Dykes has not had a team that can't score. Like, this is what he does. So I'm more disappointed in the offense because, like, this is what they're supposed to do. I have an issue with Joe Gillespie's style and with the bend but don't break mentality that he brings to the table. But his defense is supposed to be complemented by an offense that can function well and can score a lot of points. And so if you give up yards, but if you force field goals, if you get key stops, if you can kind of adjust during the game like we saw last year, then it can be successful. But it's not the case this season because the offense is also not holding up their end of the bargain. And, like, there's reasons as to why the offense has struggled. The offensive line having a hard time, that's legitimate reason. Like, if you can't block, there's not a lot you can do. And they haven't been able to run the ball effectively lately. They couldn't protect Josh Hoover in pass protection on Saturday. And so that limits a lot of the things you can do offensively. You got a young quarterback back there now. And really, I mean, even though Chandler had been around forever, you also had a guy that started the season that didn't have a lot of collegiate starts under his belt. A ton of roster turnover, and guys that you kind of counted on to step up and play really well that are newcomers just haven't seen the field, or when they are on the field, haven't been super effective. We've seen flashes from Dalen Wright. We've seen flashes where we see the big frame and the ability to go up and get the football and get yards after the catch. We've seen flashes from Jalen Robinson making contested catches, breaking tackles, moving the chains, getting things done, showing that speed, but it hasn't been consistent. Savion Williams has gotten more consistent as the years gone on, but it hasn't really come together like we thought it would. J.P. Richardson has been the guy that is sort of held up so far, but again, like he's dealt with some injuries as well, and that receiver room as a whole has just not been nearly as good as we thought going into the season. They still don't have an identity. Steven Johnson from the Fort Worth Star-Telegram wrote a really good column on Sunday, just talking about how we're 8 games in. We don't know what this team does well on offense. Like, for the first half of the year, it was running with Amani Bailey. That's kind of changed. They went with a whole new approach with Josh Hoover against BYU. It worked. It didn't work against Kansas State. So now you have a bye week, and where do you go from here? And the situational play calling has just been bad. Like, I understand why they have been reluctant to run the ball in short yardage, because the O-line is just not very good. They're not getting a lot of push to the point of attack. And, when you spread teams out in short yardage situations like that, you're giving up the numbers advantage. Like, you're not going to have the advantage blocking in the box. And so that makes it difficult for you to get yards. Now, I said this Saturday, I liked bringing Trey Sanders in as a fullback or up back and kind of giving him a quick carry under center. I thought that was cool. But then a few plays later, they were in a screen to him, which I didn't really understand at all on 3rd and 5. And then on 4th and 2, they run a slant to Savion where it looked like, either Josh got locked in on that read or it was just a one-read play, but it wasn't even close. The corner got inside leverage and broke it up. And the red zone offense has been just atrocious. And so let's look at the numbers here. Scoring offense, they're scoring 29 points a game, which is 61st in the nation. They're 127th in the nation in red zone offense. 65% success rate. So they've been down there 32 times. They've scored on 21 of those opportunities. And they've gone 15 of 32 scoring touchdowns. 44% on 3rd down, which is 34th in the nation. 127th in the nation in red zone efficiency. So when they get down in the red zone, they're just not guaranteed to get points. Not even close. 65% success rate in scoring points. And then about 50%, a little under 50% in scoring touchdowns. And when you can't, settling for field goals is bad enough, but when you can't get any points on the board, there's really no way to continue to have success and to win these football games. And so I'm not sure how Sonny is going to assess these guys at the end of the season. I mean, Joe Gillespie, this is 2 years now. I don't think the defense has improved this year, which is what we had hoped for. And then the offense hasn't held up there into the bargain. Now, I mean, I think with Kendall, there's a chance that he looks at this and says, well, it's one season. You know, we didn't have the personnel that we kind of envisioned going into the year, or the personnel didn't produce like we envisioned going into the year. And so maybe he gets another opportunity to to show that he can do this. But I think whatever you feel about Coach Briles and just how he got here and his history, like, we can all agree so far this has been a disaster. Like, the offense has just not been good. And the defense was a disaster on Saturday. I think they've been more consistent this year, but it's been primarily against bad offenses. The good news is we got 4 more games to kind of continue to let this play out and see how it goes. But a rough game for both coordinators on Saturday. And honestly, you know, it starts with the head coach too. Like, what's happening at the top of the leadership chain that is not filtering down to the rest of the team, or is filtering down. And Sonny said multiple times he didn't really expect this. He didn't know what to do. Like, post-game press conference quotes after you get beat are never – like, fans are never going to be happy with what they hear. You get beat by 38 points. There's nothing that you can say that is going to help people feel better. But I will say he does look pretty at a loss right now, which is not a good thing. And Vincent Pryor mentioned after the post-game show, like, there's no leadership on this team. And yeah, I mean, that's true. And like, there doesn't appear to be people that are stepping up and taking charge and taking control of what has become a lost season now. And I don't have a great answer for that. They had leadership last year. Now, I'll also say I think it's easier to lead when you're winning, right? Like, I feel like when there are challenges when you're winning, not reading your headlines, not getting overconfident, keeping the focus on what's in front of you. But nobody has stepped up and been like, okay, we gotta put our fist on the table here and just like draw the line in the sand and get this done. Or at least, you know, not that we've seen, or we haven't seen a huge change. So Texas Tech here in a couple of weeks. When we come back, we got some kind of notes around TCU athletics that's coming up here on Locked On Horned Frogs. PrizePicks. If you want to get involved in the daily fantasy world, PrizePicks is the place to go. It's the most fun I've ever had kind of betting and trying to make money on NFL football. It's resets weekly, so you don't have to worry about, man, what's my team look like? What's the waiver wire IR? Where the injury is at? You can do quick withdrawals, easy gameplay. They have an enormous selection of players and stat types. You can go on PrizePicks, and for instance, you can pick like, okay, is Saquon Barkley going to go for more than 60 yards? Is Patrick Mahomes going to throw for more than 2 touchdowns? Odell Beckham Jr. for the Ravens, does he have over 50 yards? Is Josh Allen going to throw for a couple of TDs on Sunday? They offer weekly promotions that can lead to big payouts. They have things like Taco Tuesday. Each Tuesday, PrizePicks discounts select player projections up to 25% to provide even more value. They now offer Apple Pay for quick and easy deposits into your account this football season. Go to prizepicks.com/LockedOnCollege and use the promo code LockedOnCollege for a first deposit match up to $100. That's free money. prizepicks.com/LockedOnCollege. Use the promo code LockedOnCollege for your first deposit match up to $100. You see it there on YouTube. PrizePicks is the best place for daily fantasy gaming. prizepicks.com/LockedOnCollege. That's the promo code. Get your deposit match today. So a couple notes here, and we'll talk some recruiting right now. Recruiting segments on Locked On Horned Frogs are brought to you by LinkedIn Jobs. Post your job for free. LinkedIn Jobs, best place to find talent, make hires. It doesn't have to be a high-stakes proposition with LinkedIn. You can find the people you need, talk to the right folks. LinkedIn Jobs brings you our recruiting segment. TCU landed a defensive lineman from LD Bell, Tristan Johnson. He is the new commit for the 2024 class. He's from Hurst, Texas, 6'2", 260 pounds. Looks like this is possibly like another development project, somebody they kind of, found in the process that they like and they feel like could be a good player. for them in the next few years. Tristan was originally committed to UTSA, and he is now committed to TCU. Had offers from Arizona State, Buffalo, Colgate, among others. Again, good size, 6'2", 260, having a really good season for LD Bell. I like that they are, focusing on local talent. They've had a couple of North Crowley players, one in 2024 class, one in 2025, and now 18 commits for this 2024 class. So TCU continues to go and find players locally and around the state of Texas. Tristan Johnson, your new commit, the defensive lineman, was committed to UTSA. They flip him and get him there on campus. Also, David Punch from Harker Heights, which is in the Killeen area. This is basketball now. He makes a commitment to TCU, 4-star power forward that they've been going after for a while now. And Jamie Dixon doing a really nice job on the recruiting trail. According to 247 Sports, TCU now has the number 11 ranked class for the 2024 season. So that 2024 commit list, 11th in the nation, which is crazy good for TCU basketball. They're doing a really nice job recruiting the high school ranks this cycle, which is not something they've had a ton of success, at least from like a rankings perspective on lately. So David Punch, big time power forward, and looks like the type of wing player that Jamie loves to have. 6'7", 205, really long, really rangy. Had offers from Penn State, Xavier, Colorado State, NC State. Brandon Jenkins from 247 says he's the perfect four-man for today's game. Works hard on both ends of the floor and is a skilled finisher who goes about his business with a composed demeanor, scores with a soft touch inside the lane, and is comfortable knocking down threes from beyond the arc. Watching some highlights from David, really good finishing around the rim. Will go up, strong, dunking the basketball, making plays in traffic, and was somebody in that Killeen area who's been really good for Harker Heights High School over the last few years. So TCU football and basketball pick up commits this weekend, and we'll have plenty of coverage the rest of this bye week. It's Locked On Horned Frogs, your team every day.